welcome to Film Market Hub Talks. My name's Rosalind and I'm the UK manager, and I'm delighted to welcome Malak El Gonemi, who's a development editor at FilmNation here in the UK. And she's also a jury member of our Feature Film Writing Contest. And welcome, Malak, lovely to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, it's great to be here.
Great. So I've just got a few questions for you, Mag, just about scripts and writing and the contest. What makes a script stand out to you?
I think what makes a script stand out to me is there's probably kind of three things that I would say are the focus. I think uniqueness of perspective. So, you know, a point of view that we haven't seen before, or a way of approaching a story that we haven't seen before. I would say specificity is really useful as well, and kind of being specific with characters and place and setting. And I think authenticity of characters and making sure that they are coming from a place of emotional truth, no matter how kind of big the story is, making sure that your characters feel relatable and they feel real and authentic. That's probably, for me, that's what makes something stand out.
Amazing. And how can a writer develop that unique writer's voice?
I think, again, it links in with the whole notion of like emotional truth and authenticity. And I think, you know, that doesn't mean that a writer needs to speak about something that they've necessarily experienced or been through, but I think, you know, drawing upon the spectrum of human experience and human emotion, and, you know, experiences of yourself and people around you, and, you know, the world that you come from, I think is always really useful. And I think not trying to replicate or emulate someone else's voice is advice that I think is helpful, because I think what makes a script your script, you know, and is the fact that you've written it. And, you know, there's often a temptation to, you know, when something takes off in the film or TV world or theatre, I think there's a temptation to try and kind of copy that and be like, well, how, you know, what did they capture that I'm trying to capture? And I think there's a delicate kind of balance to get with that, of making sure that it's still you and it's, you know, your perspective that's coming through. And I think that's totally fine that bits of yourself will come into the script. I think that's really normal. And I think just, you know, making sure that you're staying true to that, and rather than trying to just copy someone else's, I think that's probably the best way to develop your own unique voice.
Amazing. Scripts can be continually edited, redrafted, worked on. When do you think it's time to hand it over and ask for feedback or submit it to a contest or competition?
I think this is a really good question, and I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer to it, but I think, you know, from my perspective, I think you can ask for feedback at any time. I don't know if there's like a right or wrong way of doing it, but I think thinking about the people you're asking for feedback from and being clear in what you're expecting from them is useful, both for you and the person that you're asking for the feedback from, because I think, you know, if you're asking about characters, then that's quite different than if you're asking someone to look at it from more of like a, you know, commercial point of view, or do you think this will attract people? I think, you know, they're both really different questions. And so I think just clarity in terms of what you want from the feedback is really useful. And I think there's probably a temptation to kind of over edit and aim for perfection, and I think it's so important to realize that doesn't exist. You know, there's no such thing as a perfect script. I think it's about potential, and it's about making sure that your script retains that kind of sparky distinctiveness that makes it what it is. And I think often scripts can be over edited, and, you know, they can kind of feel formulaic or too polished. And I think, you know, again, it's about retaining that thing that makes it unique. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I think once you're happy that it reflects what you're trying to tell, you know, I think don't worry too much about being like, oh, but that bit's not exactly perfect or how I want it to be, because you're never going to achieve that, and you might, you know, instead go too far the other way and lose the heart of it. So yeah, it's a tricky question. I don't know that I've answered it very well, but that's what I would say.
No, I think you answered it brilliantly, and it's interesting to hear that from someone who's reading scripts, a lot, that it can be overworked and lose
Yeah.
the kind of heart. What, in your opinion, gets a script optioned by a production company?
Oh, again, a tricky question. I think it is a combination of things. I don't think I could say, oh, it's, this, and this, and that'll get your script optioned. I think from my perspective and from our perspective and what we're looking at, it's about surprising angles on stories. And I think, ultimately, every story has been told in one way or another. So I don't think it's about finding a new story. I think it's about finding a new entry point into a story. And I think for me, the thing that really will excite me when I'm reading a script is when there is that surprising perspective and that kind of uniqueness of voice, and you feel like you're being let into someone's world or someone's point of view that we don't see that often on screen. And I think, when that's captured, it's so exciting, because often it's a perspective we won't have thought of and we won't have heard of. And it can be a tiny story, it can be just a few characters in a place that we've never really seen before. But I think it's if we're seeing the world through their eyes and we haven't seen that before, for me that's immediately really exciting. And I think it's about bold ideas as well. And again, that doesn't mean necessarily it has to be a huge, massive kind of, global thriller. Like I said, it can be a really small character-driven story, but I think just being bold, and I think being brave, and, not trying to second guess what a production company wants or what a commissioner wants, because ultimately we often don't know what that is. I think just being true to yourself and your story and trusting that will shine through. That's what I think is more likely to get a script optioned or considered by a production company.
Fantastic answer, thank you. What would you recommend to a screenwriter trying to break into the industry?
I think obviously just write as much as you can, whether it's going anywhere or not. I think it's one of those things that it's really scary to kind of sit there and just be like, oh, I'm trying to get into this industry, and it feels really big and almost impossible to break into sometimes. And I think just writing, even if no one else is going to see it, will kind of get your confidence up, and it'll allow you to play around a little bit. Ultimately stories they are just playing, and they are kind of figuring out what works and figuring out what kind of characters you're interested in exploring and where you want to put them, and trying different things out. And I think not being afraid of failure and not being afraid of rejection. And I think that's such a difficult thing to say, because no one likes failing and no one likes being rejected, but just realizing that if your idea doesn't go anywhere, it's not because it's a bad idea, it's just because the way the industry works is so much of it is just seeing things in conjunction with other ideas, and sometimes something will just be too similar, or there'll be loads of things in development that are kind of already touching upon that, and it doesn't mean it's your idea was bad, because that's never the case. It's just about timing. And I think also theatre is a good way to kind of test your ideas out and test your writing out. Obviously there are crucial differences, but for us, a lot of the screenwriters that we're working with started off in theatre, and I think it's a really great way to get immediate feedback on concepts and characters, and see if they resonate with people and see if they kind of speak to people. So yeah, that's the advice I would give.
Great. How will you assess the scripts in this contest? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to discover from the writing?
I think probably this will be a kind of combination of what I've said before, but I think it is about that fresh perspective, and it's about character-driven narratives, or narratives where the characters are grounded, even if the world is massive and it's really elevated story. I think making sure that the characters and their actions ring true and feels like they're coming from a place of authenticity, even if they're characters that we never see or characters that they're not everyday people. I think as long as their actions ring true to them and the way that they've been built up, I think that's super important. And I think also playfulness, you know, and kind of a balance between light and dark. I think it doesn't have to be just one thing or the other. Things don't often have to sit within a specific genre space. And, you know, personally, I think genre skewing narratives are really fun. And I think there's so much potential there, because ultimately that is, you know, that's life. There's nothing that kind of is always dark or is always really funny. And I think when you get something where you're laughing and then you're kind of brought to tears on the next page is so exciting, because that encompasses the broadness of the kind of spectrum of human emotion and the stories that we tell and the stories that we live through. So yeah, I think that playfulness for me, I find really exciting when a writer can kind of capture that in their story. That's what I would be looking for.